My brother-in-law grabbed the microphone before the toasts even started. That's the image I keep coming back to. Not the flowers, not my dress, not the way the late afternoon light came through the windows of the venue. Just his face, smug, already a little drunk, and the way he cleared his throat like he was about to say something important. "I just want to say," he announced, swaying slightly, "that my sister deserves better than a guy who fixes other people's toilets for a living." The room went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. My husband, we'd been married for exactly 47 minutes at that point, squeezed my hand under the table. His jaw was tight. He didn't look at my brother-in-law. He looked at me. And then he leaned close and whispered, "Do you want me to say something? I can clear this up right now." I shook my head. "Not yet," I told him. "Let it go." He nodded, patient as always. "My name is Lydia. I'm 31 years old, and I married a plumber named Owen, and for about 6 months before our wedding, my sister's husband made it his personal mission to make sure everyone in our family knew exactly how he felt about that. I need to back up. I grew up in Connecticut, in a town where the houses all had 3-car garages, and the kids compared SAT tutors like baseball cards. My father ran a commercial real estate firm. My mother sat on the boards of 2 nonprofits and spent her weekends redecorating rooms that didn't need redecorating rooms that didn't need redecorating. My older sister Claire married a man named Garrett who worked in finance and wore the same brand of watch as my father and laughed at all the same jokes. I loved my family. I also spent most of my 20s quietly suffocating inside the life they'd mapped out for me. I did the right things. I got the degree, communications, Boston University. I got the apartment in the right neighborhood. I got the job at a PR firm in Hartford, where I wore blazers and sat in glass-walled conference rooms and wrote press releases for companies that made products I'd never buy. I was good at it. I was also miserable in a way I couldn't quite articulate, the kind of miserable that hides behind a full calendar in a nice apartment, and the vague sense that you're supposed to feel grateful. I quit on a Thursday in October, 3 years ago, gave 2 weeks' notice, boxed up my desk, and took a job managing social media for a small regional magazine that paid me 30% less and made me feel, for the first time in years, like I was doing something that made sense. My mother cried. My father asked if I was going through something. Garrett, who had never once asked me a real question about my life, suddenly had opinions about my career trajectory. Claire just watched me with that complicated look she gets, half worried, half something I could never quite read. I met Owen at a hardware store, which I know sounds like a setup to a joke, but it's just what happened. I was trying to figure out why my bathroom faucet was making a noise that sounded like a small animal was trapped inside the wall, and I was standing in the plumbing aisle holding a part I'd pulled up on YouTube, completely lost, when someone said, "That's not going to fix it." I turned around. He was tall, with dark hair that needed a cut and paint on his forearm that I later found out was actually sealant, not paint. He was holding a box of something I didn't recognize. He had the look of someone who had been awake since 5 in the morning and was completely fine with that. "What do you mean it's not going to fix it?" I said. "The noise you're describing, that sound is usually a washer issue. But if it's coming from inside the wall, the part you're holding isn't the problem." I stared at him. "How do you know what noise I'm describing?" "I didn't describe a noise." He smiled. It was a very good smile. "You were muttering to yourself for about 3 minutes before I said anything." I had been. I do that. We talked for 20 minutes in that aisle. He told me what was actually wrong with my faucet. I told him he was wrong. He was not wrong. He gave me his number in case I had more questions, and I told myself I was only going to use it if the faucet got worse. I texted him the next day. Not about the faucet. Owen ran his own plumbing business. He'd started it at 26 after spending 4 years working for someone else's company and realizing he was better at it than his boss and also better at running things. By the time I met him, he had 7 employees, a solid reputation across 3 counties, and more work than he could reasonably take on. He drove a truck that looked like it had lived a full life. He wore Carhartt jackets and work boots. He did not own a single blazer. He was also the most genuinely curious person I had ever met. On our third date, he asked me what I actually wanted my life to look like in 10 years. Not what job I wanted or what salary I was aiming for, but what I actually wanted. I couldn't answer. I sat there for a long moment and realized I had never been asked that question by someone who actually wanted to know the answer. He waited. He was very good at waiting. I told him eventually. It took me 3 more dates and a long walk around a reservoir in November and one terrible attempt at cooking risotto together, but I told him. And he listened in a way that made me feel like what I was saying mattered. I knew, somewhere around month 4, that I was going to marry this man. I did not tell my family right away. This was not because I was ashamed of Owen. It was because I knew exactly what was coming and I wanted a little more time before I had to deal with it. I told my mother first. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "What does he do?" When I said plumbing, her voice went careful in that particular way that meant she was choosing her words. Is that his own business, or does he work for someone? His own, I said. Okay, she said. And then, is there potential for growth there? I told my father on a Sunday phone call. He asked how Owen had gotten into the trades, as if this required an explanation. When I told him Owen had chosen it deliberately, had built something from nothing, my father made a sound I recognized. It was the sound he made when he was recalibrating, deciding how to process information that didn't fit his existing categories. Claire was the warmest. She said she wanted to meet him. She meant it. Garrett met him at a family dinner in April, about 8 months before the wedding, and from that evening forward, he made it clear, not always explicitly, but always clearly, that he thought I was making a mistake. Garrett had a habit of asking Owen questions that weren't really questions. So how do you handle, the physical wear and tear? Because I imagine that kind of work takes a toll on the body long term. Said at Easter dinner in front of 9 people. Do you find it fulfilling? I just wonder if you miss, using your brain in a different way. Said at a 4th of July cookout while Owen was helping my father carry lawn chairs. It must be nice to have a job with clear-cut problems. No ambiguity, right? Just fix the pipe, move on. Simple. Said at Thanksgiving with a smile that was doing a lot of work to seem friendly. Owen answered every question calmly and completely. He didn't take the bait. He explained the business side of things when it came up. The contracts, the expansion, the employees he'd hired and trained. But he didn't perform. He didn't try to impress Garrett. He also didn't try to diminish him, even when I, watching from across the room, wanted to throw something. What I remember most is that Garrett always seemed slightly thrown by Owen's lack of defensiveness, as if he'd expected to land a punch and found the space where Owen should have been. I told Owen once, lying in bed after a particularly long family dinner, that I was sorry. That Garrett was, I searched for the right word. He's insecure, Owen said simply. It's not about me. I know, but he looks at what I do and it scares him, Owen said. Because it means there's a version of life that doesn't look like his, and if that version is valid, then all the choices he made to get where he is aren't automatically correct. He paused. That's uncomfortable for some people. I looked at him. You've thought about this? I've had a lot of time in vans, he said. We planned a wedding that felt like us, not small exactly, but not the production my mother had initially envisioned. A venue outside the city, 110 people, late September, good food. Owen's family came from Ohio, his parents, his younger brother, his aunt and her husband. They were the kind of people who hug you the first time they meet you, and mean it. His mother pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and held both my hands and told me she was so glad her son had found someone who made him laugh. I almost cried. I held it together. My family behaved well at the rehearsal dinner. Garrett gave a toast that was technically complimentary and emotionally hollow, but he got through it without incident, and I genuinely thought that we were going to make it through the weekend cleanly. The ceremony was beautiful. I don't have a better word. The light was exactly what I'd hoped for. The vows were the ones we'd written ourselves, and when Owen saw me walking down the aisle, he pressed his fingers to his mouth for a moment. This involuntary gesture. like he was trying to contain something, and I will keep that image for the rest of my life. We got through it, we said the words, we were married. The reception started well, dinner was served, wine was poured. My father gave a toast that was warm and genuine and surprised me. Owen's brother gave a toast that made everyone laugh, and then made 3 people cry, including Owen's mother, and, quietly, me. And then Garrett stood up. He hadn't been asked to give a toast. The toasts were done. But he had a glass and a spoon and apparently a need to be heard, and before anyone could say anything, he was standing and tapping the glass, and people were turning to look. I just want to say, he started, and I felt Owen's hand find mine under the table, that my sister deserves better than a guy who fixes other people's toilets for a living. He said it with a laugh, like it was a joke, like maybe you could play it off that way if the room responded wrong. But the room didn't respond at all. It just went quiet. I mean, he continued, because he was too far in to stop now. Claire worked hard to build the life she has. She made good choices. And I look at Lydia and I think, you have a degree, you have potential, and I don't know. I just hope you know what you're doing. He sat down. He took a sip of his wine as if he'd said something reasonable. I was aware of many things simultaneously. The silence, my mother's expression, mortified, frozen, my father looking at the table, Owen's hand steady in mine, his face, which was entirely calm. He leaned toward me. Do you want me to say something? I looked at him. His voice was quiet, no edge in it, just a genuine question. Do you want me to fix this? I can fix this. That was the thing about Owen. He always asked first. I thought about it for 3 full seconds. Then I shook my head. No, I said quietly. Not here, not like this. He nodded and let it go. We got through the rest of the reception. We danced. We cut the cake. We said goodbye to our guests. Garrett spent the rest of the evening avoiding eye contact with Owen's family, who had all heard exactly what he said and had said nothing because they were too gracious to cause a scene at someone else's wedding. Owen's parents stayed with us for 2 extra days after the wedding. On the second morning, his father helped Owen fix a slow drain in our kitchen. They spent an hour on it, father and son, talking about the repair and then about other things, baseball, a project Owen was bidding on, a vacation his parents were planning. I watched them from the doorway with a cup of coffee and felt something that I didn't have a word for. Something like rightness. His mother and I sat on the back porch, and she told me that Owen had started his business with $12,000 in savings and a truck he bought from a man retiring out of the trade. That in the first year he'd worked 7 days a week and barely cleared anything after expenses. That he had never, not once, complained about it. That he had called her every Sunday and told her things were going well, and she'd known he was exhausted and she'd worried, and she'd also known he was going to be okay because he had always been the kind of person who does what he says he'll do. I know Garrett said what he said, she told me looking out at the yard. I want you to know that Owen's father and we talked about it. We know what it means, and we also know that Owen knows what it means. She looked at me. He's been underestimated before. He knows how to carry it. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. She patted my hand. You both do, she said. About 6 weeks after the wedding, I had lunch with Claire. We met at a place we'd been going to since college, a little Italian spot that had managed to survive 20 years in the same location despite changing neighborhoods and changing tastes. We split a bottle of wine. We talked about small things for a while. Her kids, my new freelance projects, a show we'd both been watching. Then she put down her glass and said, I'm sorry about Garrett. I looked at her. At the wedding, she said. I know I didn't know he was going to do that. I know, I said. I talked to him about it, a lot. She paused. He said he was trying to look out for you. I told him that's not what it looked like. She picked up her glass again, then set it down. It looked like he was trying to make himself feel better about something. I thought about what Owen had said, lying in bed that night months ago. It's not about me. Is he okay? I asked. Not sarcastically, genuinely. Claire gave me a complicated look. He's going through something. Work stuff. I don't want to get into it. She looked at her plate. It doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. We ordered dessert. We talked about other things. As we were leaving, she hugged me tighter than usual, the kind of hug that's an apology and a promise, both. I got in my car and sat for a minute before starting it. The thing was, I wasn't angry anymore. I had been for a little while. But it had burned off the way things do when you realize that someone else's smallness says nothing about the size of your life. In January, 4 months after the wedding, Owen's company landed a contract with a regional commercial developer, 3 new properties, phased plumbing installation, maintenance agreements. It was the largest contract the business had ever taken on. He came home that evening and stood in the kitchen for a moment without saying anything, and I could tell from his face that it was something significant before he said a word. "We got it," he said. We had dinner and opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving and talked for 3 hours about what this would mean, the employees he'd need to hire, the equipment, the logistics. He was energized in the quiet way he got when something real was happening, when things he'd built were starting to do what he'd always believed they could do. I did not call my family to report this. It was not a trophy I needed to display. But I did text Claire because she had asked months ago to be kept in the loop on how things were going. She texted back 3 exclamation points and then called me, and we talked for 45 minutes. At some point she said, "You know, Garrett asked me a few weeks ago about Owen's business. Like, genuinely curious. Not the way he used to ask." "What did he ask?" "He asked how someone builds something from nothing in the trades. How you get clients. How you hold on to them." A pause. "I think he's been paying attention." I didn't say anything. "He's not going to say it," Claire said. "He's not that evolved yet, but I think he sees it." Owen hired 2 new people in February. He bought a second truck in March. We started looking at houses. We'd been in my apartment, which worked. But we wanted a yard. We wanted space. We talked about kids in the abstract way that still surprised me with how much I meant it. I thought about the version of my life I'd been living before I quit that PR job, the glass offices and the press releases and the Sunday dread and the smile I wore to events I didn't want to attend. I thought about standing in that hardware store aisle, muttering to myself, and a stranger telling me I was holding the wrong part. I was holding the wrong part for a long time. It took me a while to figure that out. Life doesn't announce itself when it gets better. It doesn't send you a notification. You just look up one day and realize that the weight you'd gotten so used to carrying isn't there anymore, and the space where it was has filled up with something else. Something that feels a lot like the life you would have chosen if you'd trusted yourself sooner. I trust myself now. I married a man who builds things, who fixes things, who asks before he acts, and waits without fidgeting, and tells me the truth in a way that makes the truth feel like a gift. I married a man my brother-in-law grabbed a microphone to warn me about, in front of 110 people on the happiest day of my life. The thing is, standing there at that table with Owen's hand in mine, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even embarrassed, not really. Because I knew something Garrett didn't know. Something he couldn't see from where he was standing with his finance job and his brand name watch and his need to rank everything on a scale only he could read. I knew exactly who I had married. And knowing that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. I've thought a lot about that moment. Garrett standing up with his glass and his smug little smile, saying the words he said in front of everyone I loved. And I've thought about why it didn't break me the way he probably expected it to. The easy answer is Owen. But that's not quite right. Owen didn't make me strong. He made it easier to see the strength I'd already been building, quietly, for years. Every time I said no to a life that looked right but felt wrong. Every time I took a pay cut to do work that actually meant something. Every time I stayed in the hardware store aisle an extra 20 minutes talking to a stranger instead of walking away. What Garrett did at that wedding was mean. But it was also, in its own strange way, clarifying. Because the moment he said those words and the room went quiet and Owen's hand found mine, steady, unhurried, not performing anything, I understood something I'd been circling for years without landing on it directly. Character is not what you announce. It's what you do when you think nobody's watching, and then again when everyone is. Owen built something from nothing. He did it without fanfare, without a LinkedIn post about his journey, without ever once asking anyone to be impressed. He showed up, he did the work, he treated people well, and then he did it again the next day. That kind of consistency, the kind that doesn't need an audience, is rarer than most people realize, and it doesn't come from luck or connection or having the right last name. It comes from deciding, over and over, what kind of person you want to be. I think about Garrett differently now than I did that September. I'm not angry at him. I was for a while, but anger at someone like that is a way of letting them stay inside your head rent-free. And I've got better things to do with that space. What I feel now is something closer to pity, not the condescending kind, but the kind you feel when you watch someone miss the point of something important. He looked at Owen and saw a job title. He never looked long enough to see what was underneath it. The discipline, the risk, the years of early mornings and tight margins and quiet pride in work done right. That's the thing about judging people by the surface of things. You end up knowing a lot about surfaces and nothing about what holds them up. Claire told me once, months later, that Garrett had started asking questions about how Owen ran the business, not the loaded questions from before, the ones designed to diminish, real questions, the kind you ask when you're genuinely trying to understand something. I took that as a small, quiet sign that people can shift if they're willing to sit with discomfort long enough to learn from it. I don't know if I would have found my way to this life, to Owen, to work that means something, to a version of myself I actually recognize, if I hadn't been willing to disappoint people. That's the part nobody tells you. Choosing well sometimes means choosing something others can't see the value of yet. It means tolerating the discomfort of being misunderstood. Sometimes loudly, sometimes in front of 100 people with wine glasses and opinions. But on the other side of that discomfort is something worth having. A life that fits. A person who sees you clearly and stays anyway. Work that matters because you chose it, not because someone else approved of it. I know who I am now in a way I didn't when I was writing press releases in a glass office, smiling at events I didn't want to attend. That clarity cost something. I'd pay it again without hesitating.